Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Black Lawyers Podcast. Today, we have the pleasure of interviewing someone that needs no introduction, the Kerry Washington. Thank you so
Mm.
much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
You have a cult following of Olivia Pope, probably for the rest of your life. I know you've played many characters, but you have a lot of Olivia Pope fans that are excited to hear from you today. But before we jump into all the things that you do in Hollywood and advocacy and things like that, let's first just start off with who was Kerry Washington before you were the Hollywood entertainer, actress, social justice advocate? Like, who were you before? Where did you go to school? Where did you graduate? Who were you before?
Well, I was born in New York City. I grew up in the Bronx and I went to college in DC. It's such an interesting question to ask, actually, because I'm at the end of the process of writing my memoir. And so I feel like I need a good 400 pages to answer that question. It's a really complicated question.
Mhm.
But I'm really excited, actually. I have tended to be in my career a more private person when it comes to talking about myself and my personal life, but it's been a really wonderful exercise and opportunity for me to sit down and ask myself that question. Who was I? What happened? What did I become? Who am I now? Those are kind of a lot of the questions that I've been grappling with. But I think it's complicated. I think that's a really multifaceted question. I'm a daughter. I'm a mother. I'm a wife. Before being a professional actor, I was an amateur actor. I was a student. I was a traveler. I was a girlfriend. I was a lots and lots of things.
Mhm. Well, you mentioned that you went to school in DC. I'm actually originally from DC,
Oh,
and
you
I
are? What
always get
part?
so the Brooklyn Catholic University area. Brooklyn Catholic
Okay,
University
yeah.
is the Brooklyn area.
Hmm.
And so it's interesting because your Olivia Pope character is, of course, in DC, and you went to school in DC. Um, and now, even without actually going to law school. Obviously, we know that Olivia Pope went to law school and was a lawyer, and a crisis manager. You played that character so well. And I guess that's the whole point of being a great actress. But did you ever consider going to law school because of kind of like your background?
Yeah, it was my mother's dream. I mean, my mom used to say to me, closing arguments are just like monologues. And I think my parents were really nervous that I would be a starving artist with good reason, right? Like the odds of making it in my business are really slim to none. And so she encouraged law or some other form of graduate school. So I did. I thought a lot about law school and also graduate school for maybe clinical psychology. Those were kind of the two routes that I was considering. I was giving myself 1 year after graduating from undergrad to kind of try to begin a career of some sort. And I was I had both my LSAT study book and my GMAT study book by my bed to kind of think about which I would launch into if the year didn't go as I dreamt that it would.
What did you major in at GW?
So I designed an interdisciplinary major,
Oh, excuse
which
me.
was
That's
I was really, really fascinated by the role that performance plays in culture, both in kind of indigenous culture, the role of performance as ritual, and then also in modern culture, the role of performance as kind of presentation of identity. So there were a couple of really amazing, there probably still are, postgraduate programs in something called performance studies. And those programs, depending on the school you went to, like at Northwestern, the performance studies department was really heavily influenced in psychology and sociology. And at NYU, it was a lot of anthropology, dramatic lit. So I kind of combined all of that to create an undergraduate major that had a lot of psych and soc and dramatic lit and anthropology. And I spent my time studying the role that performance plays in different societies and cultures and history and modern day identification. So it was really exciting and hard to do because they want to make sure you're not
It
just trying
sounds
to
hard.
avoid, they want to make sure that students who are designing their major are not just trying to avoid statistics. So I had to like defend my thesis and all that, but it was really fun. And I, as a result, I really spent my time in undergraduate school studying the things that I was most curious about, which I think is such a cool opportunity. And
Yeah, for sure. Obviously you did graduate. You didn't, obviously move forward with the LSAT, the GMAT. You followed your dreams. I think I've been watching you since, I don't know, Save the Last Dance. I mean, I think I've watched all
Mhm.
your kind of early movies. And then we fast forward, you are this amazing character, Olivia Pope, on the iconic Scandal. Um, do you have a favorite episode? I know there's so many, but is there any episode that you just really love that you could watch over and over again? I don't know how much, you watch of yourself on TV,
I
but
don't
is there
watch
any?
any of them. I don't watch a single episode. It's really hard. They're like my children, you know what I mean? First of all, they're all so special to me. Every single episode was special to me. I also don't really remember all of them. I know that seems like a contradictory statement, but they're just like all a beloved blur of one big episode in my brain. There are some standouts. I think in the first season, episode 6, which was our first flashback episode, The Trail. So it was the first time you saw like the origin story of all of them. That's an episode that I really love. I love the lawn chair episode because that was with Courtney Vance, and it was one of the first times that Olivia Pope really took a stance racially, on a racial social justice issue. So that meant a lot to me. Yeah, but I just love them
There's so
all.
many, right? Well, I'll
Yeah.
tell you my favorite one,
Yes,
or
please. Yes, please.
one of my favorites is really the finale when they have
Really?
this portrait of you up in, what is considered like kind of similar to what they did with Michelle and Barack Obama with the portraits of
Mm-hmm.
presidents, and how because your character was so profound and so much a part of that presidency that they gave you your own portrait. And I thought that was amazing. It made me think of the Obamas and just like how special it is. I think, you know, whatever you want to call them, Generation Z and younger, they grew up with a Black president, and Black people in these roles of power, but they don't understand, like, it just did not exist for us. So
Yeah.
it's still sometimes like hard to believe it even happened. Sometimes I just still pretend that he's president.
I know. I think
So
you're not alone there.
yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. It's very debated. People were saying, did that portrait mean that she became first lady? Did that portrait mean that she became president? Or was that portrait just a kind of statement of her importance as in her role as a crisis manager? It's really interesting. I don't, people always want me to answer that question. I'm like, it's not my question to answer. You have to ask Shonda. It's her world,
That's
it's
the
her
Shonda.
show.
She wrote it. And
Yeah.
she probably
Hmm.
did it that way, kind of. She's really good at letting the audience fill in the blanks, like make it
Yeah.
what you want to be. So I
I
love
think
that.
it's
I love
really, I think it's a way that she really respects her audiences. She gives us room. I could say us because I'm on all her other shows, I have the same experience, right? But she gives us room to fill in the blanks with our own imagination. And so it leaves room for us to bring ourselves to the project in a way that I think is really special.
Well, whatever the episode is, I think no one can ever say that the role of Olivia Pope is not iconic. Of course, it's on our fundraising t-shirt. For those of you
Yes.
listening or watching clips of this episode, Carrie was so gracious enough to partner with us and fundraise with the NAACP, the special edition shirt. So, of course, it has her name on it and all the other Black TV lawyers. And it was just so exciting to do that. And I think even you were taken aback about how many people flooded you with, oh my God, I went to law school because of Olivia Pope, or I went to law school because of Claire. I went, like it just was this bombardment. How do you feel that you are one of the very few, obviously back TV lawyers that have inspired so many people to go to law school? How does that make you feel that you're literally, shout out to mom, you didn't become a lawyer, but you were a TV lawyer. And now because of you, there are probably thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of lawyers. You literally, your character is inspiring so many. How does that make you feel?
Yeah, it's very moving for me. I when people come up to me and say either they went into PR or they went into law or they specifically went into crisis management because of Olivia Pope, I'm so blown away. I always joke like, well, I'm so glad she inspired you professionally. I hope she didn't inspire you personally. Don't go around sleeping with other people's husbands. But she is, she had such a profound impact on my life. She really changed my life and truly was such an inspiration to me. So, if that had been all it was, it would have still been such a gift and a privilege. But the fact that other people have gotten something out of her and what she represented and how she walked through the world, I just feel really lucky. I feel really blessed to have kind of been of service and given people inspiration. Inspiration it is it's a resource that is so out of our control. And it is so precious. So to know that the work inspires other people is a tremendous honor.
Well, you haven't stopped. You've always used your platform, but even since Olivia Pope, you've always used your platform for not just your Hollywood stuff. You are a big social justice advocate. Are there some causes that, you know, I don't want to say you most care about, but you kind of most focus on that you would like to share with the audience? I know voting is a big one. But is
Yeah,
there, in addition to voting, is there anything else that you're just like super passionate about and you love talking about all the time?
voting. So, I've done a lot of work around democracy building, and I've obviously had some candidates that I've been very vocal about supporting. But a few years ago, we started this cohort called the VIP cohort. It's Vision into Power, and what I did was rather than focus just on candidates. I decided to pick places that were really important in our democracy building, states that really matter on the Electoral College, and lend my resources and my support to grassroots organizations on the ground that are working toward democracy building, because that to me is the long-term solution. Like, it's wonderful to have important candidates who are doing the work. And in the last election, actually, I really focused on secretaries of state. I did an SOS tour, which stood for secretaries of state, because
I love that.
those really are our defenders of democracy, and they are the ones who make sure that we have free and fair elections. And it's a down ballot election that a lot of people weren't paying attention to, right? Even though those races are so fundamental. So I toured a bunch of states focusing and uplifting secretaries of state. And if I was there and there were great governors races and Senate races, I led my voice to those as well. But really saying, like, people in this state, your secretary of state is the person who makes sure that your vote matters and counts. So that's one way that I've been trying to refocus my attention in democracy building. And then I picked an organization in each of these states, 10 organizations in, again, really important states on the map. And we've been working with organizations that are focused on long-term solutions on building democracy and community, on not just uplifting a candidate, but uplifting a community to say, like, this is not about hero worship. Like, our election should not be about thinking that one person can come in and swoop in and solve all the problems. We have to remember that each of us is the Olivia Pope of our neighborhood, of our town, of our school board, of our community, that we all have the power to make a positive impact and really transform our communities for the better. But we have to participate, we have to show up. So there are, this is not about reinventing the wheel. There are organizations who are doing this work, and I'm just trying to support those organizations to be able to continue to do the work, scale the work, do it in bigger ways.
Well, we are praying that some of these organizations are in Georgia and especially
Yeah.
Florida right now with everything going on with DeSantis.
Yes.
So we're
Yes.
praying
Yes.
that
Yeah,
whatever organization
I can send you we can, like, when this comes up, we can send links for all 10 organizations all over the country. Yeah.
great, great, great. Yes, yes. Local, a lot of times people do focus on the president, and that don't get me wrong, that election is super
It's
important.
important. It's
It is.
important, but
But
these
if you're
down
not
ballot
voting,
races,
but here's the
yes.
thing, but if you're not voting for your local mayor or
Yep.
governor, like
Yep.
I said, right now, Florida is in chaos right now because of all the
Yeah.
diversity and inclusion stuff being removed. So
Yeah.
as you can see, even if you
And
voted
also, yeah.
for certain president, if you're in Florida and you voted the wrong governor in, you're going to see an impact pretty soon to your schools,
Yeah.
your fraternities, your sororities, and things like that. So,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
we will definitely include that with the episode, those list of organizations that you support. Obviously, you are a very successful entertainer, actress. Um, you didn't have to use because everyone obviously does not use their platform for advocacy. So just curious,
Right.
is it because your mom wanted you to be a lawyer? Is that kind of like, what is your reason? Is there a reason why, once you start to really hit your success stride, you were like, you know what? Yeah, I'm a successful actress, but I still want to use this platform for advocacy. Is there a reason why you decided to also use the platform for both?
No, I think it's almost the opposite. So I started doing advocacy and activism work in high school, and then and continued in college, and some of it around healthcare, some of it around safer sex issues. I was in a theater company in the early 90s that was all about AIDS education and prevention, and so we did a show about safer sex and homosexuality and identity and drug abuse. And we would go into communities where schools would say, like, yes, we want to save lives, but you can't say the word condom. And we'd be like, that's not going to work. Right. So, so that kind of activism was planted in me very early on. My parents are both very involved in the community and trying to pay it forward and do well. So for me, it was more of an issue of, it wasn't like my star started to rise and I was like, oh, I should pick an issue. It was more like, as my career continued to progress, I wanted to make sure that I didn't start to silence myself out of fear of, like, wanting people to like me, or wanting to make sure that producers, didn't judge me or weren't taken aback by my politics. So the challenge was more to, like, not become a political person, but to remain true to myself as my career began to progress.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. What would you say is maybe, the best thing about being an advocate versus maybe like the hardest thing about being an advocate? You kind of hinted towards the hardest part. You don't want people to kind of put you in a box about your views, but what's maybe the best and the hardest thing about being an advocate?
Well, this is something I really learned from Eve Ensler, who, wrote the Vagina Monologues and started V-Day, which is this global movement to end violence against women. And she really taught me that when I'm feeling overwhelmed by the state of the world and, like, how upsetting things can be as a woman, as a person of color, as a mother, as somebody who cares about the planet, um, that sometimes it feels like the solution is to get back in bed. And I'm all about the nap ministry. I think a good rest is important.
I love that, Nat Ministry.
Yes. But I also think that plugging into solution has often been where I have found hope. That, being out there in community, rallying, protesting, volunteering, knocking on doors, helping people to remember their power, that has often helped me to remember my power and to feel less hopeless about the future.
Mm,
So I think that's the best thing about activism and advocacy for me is I feel like I'm participating in the solution so that even when it's hard, I'm less likely to feel hopeless because I'm in the trenches with other people who are doing the work. I think sometimes the hardest thing is remembering to keep an open mind, right? Like sometimes I get so clear that I'm on the right side of justice, you know, that that it can be hard to communicate with people whose views I don't agree with. And I really try to keep an open mind because we're not going to move hearts by being adversarial all the time or by shaming people or calling people out. Like I've been trying to, there's a really beautiful book that I love called The Persuaders. And he talks a lot about, Anand talks a lot about calling people in rather than calling people out. And that's something that I try to do in my work now is to, that's not to say we don't hold people
right.
accountable, but to
Hmm.
try to keep an open mind to meet people where they're at, because I don't think that shaming people is as effective as embracing people.
Mm, absolutely.
But it's hard. That's hard to
It's hard.
do,
It's
you know?
hard.
It's
Well, you know,
hard.
you obviously had your character, Olivia Pope with Scandal, being a crisis manager, a lawyer, and all those things. And since then, obviously, we fast forward to present time, and you have this very cool Onyx collection on Hulu with various shows that you've been producing that people are just like binging and eating up. And I actually just finished Unprisoned, and obviously, I
Oh, thank
finished
you for
I
watching.
I I finished watching, Reasonable Doubt like in 5 seconds. So the shows are so good. Um, and what I love, and again, I have to ask, is this just a coincidence or is this by design? Both shows have like this legal layer to them. Reasonable Doubt,
Hmm.
Michael Ealy trying to transition, come home from prison and transition. And then even in Reasonable Doubt, you have the same thing going on with your dad being, locked up for 17 years and coming out and you just saying, and I see she's a psychologist. I didn't know you had your part of your major had the psychology thing. So you got to like
Yeah.
do a test run on that as well. So like, was it
Hmm.
designed? Is it just a coincidence that your new shows kind of have this legal tie, or it just this is like a topic that you're interested in?
I would say both, right? Like it is a little bit of a coincidence, but I think it's because, at my company, Simpson Street, what we're always trying to do is to upend the idea of other, right? We're trying to center marginalized communities and make sure that we're telling stories that are not told about communities that are pushed to the side. So in our community, this is what we're going through. The reality is that there are 80 million Americans living with a criminal record. So if you think about that, this is who we are as a country. We incarcerate at rates that far outweigh any other industrialized nation. Our justice system is not just. And so when we talk about the stories that need to be told, this is what kept bubbling to the surface. These are the stories that need to be centered because it's not a rare experience, right? For each of those 80 million people that are walking around with a criminal record, each of them is surrounded by friends and family members who love them and who care about them as they try to re-enter society. So the story that we're telling in Imprisoned, the stories that we're telling in Reasonable Doubt, these are our stories and they're not being told. So we want to be centering important stories about who we really are that need to be told. So it's crazy that it's really fun for me also that we're kind of looking at this phenomenon from such different lenses, right? Reasonable Doubt is such a like a spicy, serious drama, and Unprisoned is this much more kind of lighthearted dramedy. Um, but and in Reasonable Doubt, we're talking about it more from like a romantic relationship dealing with reentry, and in On Prison, we're talking about it from more of a family member. But this is who we are. It's what we're dealing with. We went to South by Southwest to do a presentation of the show. We had 4 sit-down interviews with journalists. 3 out of the 4 journalists shared that they had a parent who had been incarcerated. 3 out of 4 journalists, and all different races, One journalist was Pakistani, his parents were immigrants. Another journalist was Latina. Another journalist was Black. And so this is who we are as a country. We have to be looking at this. We have to be thinking about this. We have to be figuring out how to do better, how to really rehabilitate and serve our communities and not just be feeding into this prison industrial complex.
Well, I love what you say about how many people are incarcerated because, we're supposed to be the land of the free, but the irony is in
Mm,
America, we actually have more imprisoned people just in the United States more than in the whole world.
mm,
So it's just
mm.
crazy that like we're the most imprisoned nation in the world. And it
Uh-huh.
just really, you can't make up the irony, with
Yeah.
America supposedly being the land of the free. So again, I think, like you said, whether it's destined or coincidence or designed this way, we appreciate that you take the time to think about these. Because again, you could do any project you want. You could go after you're Kerry Washington, right? So you can go after any project you want, but you go after these projects where you know that it's going to have like these messages and things like that. So I'm really enjoying it, especially the little girl version of you who's cursing
Oh
and acting
my
like an
goodness,
adult.
isn't
I'm
she
like, I don't even know how they
amazing?
recorded those scenes without cracking up. I'm like, how did she record this scene with this little girl going off like this?
I know. I have to say, the unsung hero of this series is our Jordan's parents. Jordan, who plays Little Paige. Like the fact that
Okay.
her parents let her come to work and say that stuff, that they trust us with her, is so tremendous because she's so talented and so wonderful. And she really is such like a she's a star of the show, so I'm really grateful to Jordan's parents that they let her come and play.
Well, for sure. We obviously I think most people have been binge watched probably at this point both shows. Is there anything, I know legally sometimes you can't give us a heads up, but is there anything heads up about any of the other shows have these shows having season twos? And if you can't say anything about these shows just yet, is there anything else, our audience should be on the lookout for from you?
Well, I'm really, really hopeful for season two for both shows. We're really excited about everything that Onyx Collective is doing, and people have really tuned in and been so enthusiastic. So, fingers crossed. If you know anybody who hasn't watched the shows, make sure that they tune in. That's what keeps us in on the good side, and hopefully having season two. I'm very hopeful for both shows. Yeah.
Well, we're hopeful too. We're rooting for you for these projects and the projects to come. We always end our episode with a Black Excellence Moment of the Week. You are
Oh,
a Black woman in Hollywood. You're not just an actress, you're a producer, you're a director. So you can appreciate this Black Excellence Moment of the Week. Sonia Coleman was named Chief Human Resource Officer at Walt Disney Company, which is huge. We want to congratulate Sonia Coleman for that huge achievement with the Walt Disney Company. And, we, again, Carrie, we really appreciate you coming on. Like I said, a lot of people are looking forward to this episode and just like,
yay.
everything, that's coming next with you. And as always, we are rooting for everyone Black. Take care, everyone.